Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take stacks of information, messy sources, sometimes conflicting accounts, and try to distill it all into something you can really get your head around.
Yeah, something that makes sense.
Exactly. And today, we are plunging right into the, well, fascinating, incredibly complex, and ultimately very tragic life of Anne Boleyn. She is one of history's most iconic figures, for sure.
Absolutely.
We've pulled together a whole range of stuff, historical accounts, deep academic analysis, even how people see her today, to really try and unpack her story.
It's a great topic because, her story often gets boiled down to just those few sensational headlines, doesn't it?
Totally. Henry VIII's second wife, chopped head, treason, end of story.
Right. But the deeper you go, the more you find this woman of, well, profound influence, really sharp intellect, remarkable courage, too. And her life was just so intertwined with this massive transformation in English history, the English Reformation. I mean, she was right there at the heart of it.
So our mission today is really to move beyond those cliches, get past the sort of soundbite version.
Yeah, explore who she actually was.
We'll trace her journey, starting from those formative years in Europe, which were really important, than that passionate, revolutionary relationship with Henry VIII.
Definitely revolutionary. Changed everything.
The intense pressures of being queen, which must have been immense.
Unimaginable, really.
And then, the shocking circumstances of her downfall, her execution, and the legacy she left behind, which is still debated today.
Still so powerful.
So let's get into it. Let's unpack Anne Boleyn. Okay, so starting right at the beginning, there's this common idea that Anne Boleyn came from, humble beginnings, almost like a Cinderella story.
Right, that she sort of burst onto the scene from nowhere.
But the sources, they paint a very different picture, don't they?
Completely different. She actually came from a wealthy family. Privileged, ambitious, and incredibly well-connected.
Her father, Thomas Boleyn, he wasn't just a minor courtier.
Not at all. He was on the King's Council, served as an ambassador, a serious player.
And her mother's side, the Howards, that's one of England's top families.
Absolutely preeminent. And they could even trace lineage back to King Edward I.
So in terms of social standing, her family was actually, significantly higher up than Henry's later English wives, like Jane Seymour or Catherine Parr.
Oh, definitely. There's no comparison, really. The Boleyns were established gentry with powerful aristocratic ties.
And right from the start, there's this interesting bit of mystery, isn't there? Her birth year.
Yes. It's fascinating. The records point to two possibilities, 1501 or 1507.
That's quite a gap. 6 years.
It is. And later sources, like William Camden writing in the late 16th century, he stated 1507 pretty definitively.
Okay.
But there's compelling evidence that points earlier to 1501, and it really changes how we see her early experiences.
What kind of evidence?
Well, the main thing is a letter Anne herself wrote to her father.
Right.
It's in French, and she wrote it from the court of Margaret of Austria, where she arrived in 1513.
Okay, so if she was born in 1507, she'd only be 6 years old in 1513.
Exactly. Could a 6-year-old write that kind of letter, even a simple one, in French? Highly unlikely.
But a 12-year-old born in 1501, that seems much more plausible.
Much more plausible, even though, admittedly, the letter's spelling is described as, appalling, even for the time.
Huh. Okay, languages were still evolving then, I guess.
Very much so. But the letter shows she's trying to impress him, show off her French. It points to her father's ambition in getting her there and her desire to please him.
And getting a place at Margaret of Austria's court was a big deal, wasn't it, for an English girl?
Huge. It was an unusual honor. Margaret was the regent of the Netherlands, daughter of the Holy Roman Emperor, a really sophisticated, politically important court.
So this wasn't just finishing school, this was serious exposure.
Absolutely. And Margaret seems to have taken a real shine to her. She affectionately called her La Petite Boleyn, Little Boleyn.
That's quite sweet.
And she praised her manners, her studiousness, said Anne was so presentable and so pleasant considering her youthful age.
High praise from someone like Margaret.
Definitely. It suggests Anne made a strong impression, adapted quickly, learned French fast. She was advanced for her age.
And this experience, being immersed in this high European culture, that really set her apart from other English ladies back home.
Profoundly so. Most aristocratic women in England didn't get that kind of continental experience. She was absorbing culture, politics, languages firsthand. It shaped her entire outlook.
And she didn't just stay in the Netherlands, did she? She moved on to France.
That's right. After Margaret's court, she went to France. First, serving as a maid of honor to Queen Mary Tudor.
Henry VIII's sister.
Yeah.
Who married the old French king Louis XII.
The very one. And then, after Mary returned to England, Anne stayed on for almost 7 years, serving Queen Claude.
Queen Claude, the wife of the new French king, Francis I. Wow, 7 years. That's a long time.
A huge chunk of her formative life. And because she was fluent in both French and English, she apparently acted as a kind of go-between sometimes in diplomatic stuff.
Really? So
Yeah.
playing a small role even then.
Hints of it, yes. And she was definitely at the Field of Cloth of Gold in 1520 with Queen Claude's household, witnessing that massive spectacle.
So this French period was truly transformative.
Oh, completely. Queen Claude's court was a real hub of Renaissance learning, art, fashion, and soaked it all up.
Perfected her French,
It
obviously.
perfected her French, developed interests in art, fashion, illuminated manuscripts, literature, music, poetry,
Quite the Renaissance woman.
and crucially, religious philosophy. This is where her later religious leanings likely took root.
How so?
Well, the historian Eric Ives argues very convincingly that she owed her evangelicalism to France.
Evangelicalism,
And-
meaning reformist ideas.
Exactly. She was reading reformist books, including French translations of the Bible by Jacques Lefebvre. This instilled in her a strong belief in having the Bible in the vernacular in English for English people.
And maybe a skepticism towards the Pope's authority.
Precisely. It raises that big question. How much did this French exposure to early Protestant ideas shape her later actions with Henry? It suggests her religious convictions were deep-seated, not just political maneuvering later on.
That makes sense. It wasn't just academic learning either, was it? The French court had a certain style.
Oh, absolutely. She learned the dances, the etiquette, but also the art of conversation, flirtation, courtly love, that whole sophisticated game.
There's that contemporary poet, William Forrest, who said she was an excellent dancer.
Yeah. Praised her passing excellent skill, said she could trip and go. It paints a picture of someone lively, engaging, charismatic, someone who knew how to use her charm.
And during this time, she might have met Marguerite de Navarre, Francis the Sister Vaux.
It's believed so, yes. And Marguerite was a major figure, a writer, a patron of humanists and reformers whose own ideas sometimes pushed the boundaries of orthodoxy.
So potentially a mentor figure.
Potentially, yes. Someone who could have deepened Anne's interest in religious reform, poetry, literature. A powerful female role model interested in intellectual and spiritual matters.
You can see how all this would give her an edge back in England.
Definitely. And there's her personal Book of Hours, that beautiful manuscript prayer book at Hever Castle.
Right, with her own writing in it.
Yes, inscriptions in her own hand. They reflect her piety, but also maybe a sense of destiny. There's one famous inscription, "The time will come, I, Anne Boleyn."
Chilling, knowing what happened.
Isn't it? It suggests this deep belief in her own significance, maybe even a kind of prophetic sense. She was complex, pious, worldly, ambitious, all shaped by this unique European upbringing.
Okay, so Anne comes back to England around 1522, and she makes an impact pretty much straight away.
An immediate stir, yeah, she stood out.
Became a fashion icon, known for her poise, her grace, that charm.
Even people who didn't like her later admitted she had this magnetism.
And it wasn't necessarily about conventional beauty, was it? Accounts differ on how she actually looked.
They really do. Some called her beautiful, others noted her dark complexion, long neck, wide mouth. One Venetian said she was not one of the handsomest women in the world, but had beautiful, dark eyes.
So her appeal was more about her personality, her wit,
Yeah.
that European sophistication.
Exactly. Her charisma, her intelligence, how she carried herself. She brought something different to the English court.
Which brings us to Henry VIII. We often picture him as the older, overweight tyrant.
Right, the Holbein portrait version.
But in his youth, when Anne met him, he was completely different.
A world away. He was charismatic, incredibly athletic, tall, 6'2", which was very tall then, considered really handsome.
Good at everything, jousting, tennis, archery.
The ultimate Renaissance prince in many ways. A Venetian ambassador even said his face was so beautiful it would become a pretty woman.
Wow. And he was seen as quite affable initially.
Harmed no one, they said early on. But the key thing, the twist, is that he wasn't born to be king.
Right, his older brother Arthur was the heir.
And Arthur's sudden death when he was just 15 changed everything. It thrust Henry into the role unexpectedly.
And burdened him with this huge pressure.
This overriding obsession, as historians call it, securing a male heir.
Because the Tudor dynasty was still relatively new, wasn't it? Their claim wasn't rock solid.
Not at all. Henry VII, his father, had faced rebellions. A secure succession, an undisputed male heir, was absolutely vital for stability. It was existential.
And that obsession becomes the king's great matter.
Precisely. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon.
His brother Arthur's widow.
Yes. They'd been married over 20 years. But after so many pregnancies,
Heartbreaking miscarriages, stillbirths.
only one surviving child, their daughter, Mary. A son, Henry, had died as an infant.
And Henry becomes convinced the marriage is cursed.
He does. He starts citing the Bible, Leviticus, about marrying a brother's wife, leading to childlessness.
And his experts conveniently interpret childless to mean no sons.
Exactly. It gave him the theological justification he was desperately seeking.
So how does Anne fit into this picture? When does Henry notice her?
It seems to be around 1526, 4 years after she'd returned to court, and it wasn't just a passing glance.
We know this from...
His love letters to her. They survived, remarkably, in the Vatican Library.
That's incredible. What do they show?
Real, passionate infatuation, not just political talk. He writes things like, "I and my heart put ourselves in your hands,
Wow.
begging you, not let absence lessen your affection." He even drew a little love heart with AB inside. Signed it, Henry Rex.
Like a schoolboy.
Exactly. Utterly smitten. These letters completely blow apart the idea it was just a cold political arrangement from the start.
And he sent her gifts too, didn't he? Like that little gold whistle?
Yes, that pendant. Tiny, intricate. It had a whistle, but also like an earwax scoop and a toothpick built in.
Ah, practical.
But the message seemed clear. If you whistle, I will come. It's very personal, very intimate.
But Anne, she wasn't going to be just another mistress.
No way. That was her masterstroke, really. She held firm. She would only be his if she was his acknowledged queen.
That's incredibly bold and powerful.
It put her in a unique position. And her own piety, her reformist leanings, they actually helped.
How so?
She brought William Tyndale's book, The Obedience of a Christian Man, to Henry's attention.
What did that argue?
Basically that the king is the supreme authority in his own kingdom, above the Pope.
Which must have been music to Henry's ears.
Absolutely. It gave him the ideological justification he craved, and wasn't just playing hard to get. She was offering a theological partnership, supporting church reform, protecting translators of the Bible.
So where did this leave Cardinal Wolsey, Henry's chief minister? He was supposed to get the annulment sorted, wasn't he?
He was, but he failed. And that failure, combined with Anne's influence and Wolsey's many enemies, sealed his fate.
Why couldn't he get the annulment?
The Pope, Clement VII, was basically under the thumb of Emperor Charles V.
Catherine of Aragon's nephew.
Exactly. After Charles's troops sacked Rome in 1527, the Pope couldn't afford to offend him by annulling his aunt's marriage. Wolsey tried everything, even setting up a court in England.
But the Pope stalled.
Essentially, yes, kicked it back to Rome. Anne and others convinced Henry that Wolsey's loyalty was ultimately to the Pope, not him.
So Wolsey was dismissed.
Dismissed in 1529, arrested for basically treason against the king's authority. He died of illness in 1530 on his way to face trial.
If he hadn't died.
Almost certainly would have been executed. His fall really marked Anne's rise in influence.
So with Wolsey gone, Henry and Anne defied the Pope.
Openly. And by December 1532, after 7 long years.
7 years. That's incredible patience and determination from both of them.
It really is. All the evidence suggests they finally became lovers then.
And then the secret marriage in January 1533.
Yes, privately at Whitehall. Anne was already pregnant.
They must have been sure it would be a boy this time.
Overjoyed, believing their struggles were over, they had, as you say, defied a pope and were about to redefine a kingdom.
So Anne is crowned queen, June 1st, 1533. A huge, lavish ceremony. A real statement.
Absolutely. A display of power and legitimacy after all the controversy.
But with that crown came massive expectations, didn't it? Primarily.
The heir. The male heir. Everything hinged on that.
How did she cope with that pressure? It must have been immense.
Unfathomable. Even her coronation song, the White Falcon song, laid it out explicitly.
The White Falcon was her symbol, right?
Her personal badge. The song said she should bring fruit according such a falcon white, linking her directly to fertility and the dynasty.
No pressure then.
None at all. And then, September 7th, 1533, she gives birth.
To a girl, Elizabeth.
A healthy girl, christened with great splendor, proclaimed Princess of England, but undeniably a heavy blow.
They had been so sure it would be a boy.
Utterly convinced, all the royal doctors, the astrologers, had predicted a son.
So the jousting tournament planned for a prince was canceled.
Immediately canceled. And they even had letters pre-written announcing the birth of a prince. They had to quickly add an "es" to make it princess.
Oh, wow. That really shows the level of expectation and disappointment.
It really does.
And you have to think, this wasn't just personal disappointment. The whole break with Rome, Catherine's annulment, it all needed justifying.
Absolutely. A male heir was seen as essential to legitimize Henry's radical actions, to secure the Tudor line against Catholic enemies at home and abroad. The pressure was political, religious, dynastic, personal, everything.
And this pressure clearly took its toll on her subsequent pregnancies.
Tragically, yes. There were reported miscarriages in the summer of 1534 and again in 1535.
And there's that theory about phantom pregnancies, pseudocyesis.
Yes, suggested by gynecologist John Dewhurst. Given how desperate Anne must have been to conceive and prove her fertility in an age without reliable pregnancy tests.
She might have experienced all the symptoms, believed she was pregnant when she wasn't.
It's a plausible theory. It really highlights the intense psychological burden she was carrying, how much she needed to give Henry that son.
Despite all this stress, though, she established herself as queen. She ran a lavish court.
Oh yes, she maintained the expected royal magnificence, spent fortunes on gowns, jewels, furnishings, renovating palaces.
Her motto was, the most happy, wasn't it?
The most happy. Poignant looking back. And her symbol remained the white falcon.
But underneath that surface, public opinion wasn't great, was it?
It was turning sour, definitely. People started blaming her for Henry's actions, his perceived tyranny.
Calling her names?
Awful names. The king's whore, a naughty pig, basically prostitute, crude and vicious stuff.
And her reformist religious views didn't help?
Not with the general population, no. England was still largely Catholic in sentiment. Her evangelical leanings felt alien, threatening to many.
And she wasn't quiet about them. She promoted reformers.
She did. She read the Bible openly, encouraged piety among her ladies, supported reformist clergy like Cranmer and Latimer, helped them get positions.
But then the executions. Sir Thomas More, Bishop John Fisher.
Exactly. These were hugely respected figures who refused to accept Henry's supremacy over the church.
Their executions were seen as martyrdom by many.
And Anne got associated with that bloodshed. It cemented her negative image for a large part of the population, making her the symbol of this unpopular religious upheaval.
So the start of 1536. There's a bit of hope. Anne is pregnant again.
A brief moment of optimism, yes. This time, surely it would be the son.
But then, disaster. That jousting accident.
Yes, January 1536. Henry falls heavily unconscious for over 2 hours, a really serious incident.
And some historians think this head injury might have actually changed his personality.
There's strong speculation about that. Damage to the frontal lobe could potentially explain some of his later behavior, the increased paranoia, cruelty, impulsiveness.
And then, just days after this accident.
Anne miscarries. And it's a boy, about 3.5 months along.
Devastating. She blamed the shock of Henry's accident.
She did. And the Spanish ambassador, Chapuis, wrote that she'd miscarried her savior. He saw it as the final nail in her coffin.
Henry's reaction.
Reportedly distraught, saying, "I see that God will not give me male children." He took it as a sign. Just like with Catherine, the marriage was doomed in his eyes.
It's right around this time his attention starts to shift.
Exactly. Towards Jane Seymour, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting.
And Jane plays it very cleverly, doesn't she? Returning Henry's gift of money.
Very shrewdly. Saying she was from a good family, would only accept gifts leading to an advantageous marriage.
Basically signaling, queen or nothing, no mistress role for her either.
Precisely. Chapuis saw it as her playing hard to get, a calculated move.
Which brings us to the big question. Was Anne actually guilty of what came next? Adultery? Incest? Treason?
It seems incredibly unlikely. Yes, accounts say she was spirited, maybe flirtatious within the bounds of courtly love she learned in France.
But actual adultery, risking everything.
The stakes were just too high. Many historians think her reputation was deliberately destroyed, much like other powerful women whose independence is seen as threatening.
So the reality is, Henry needed a way out.
He needed out, quickly and decisively. And his chief minister, Thomas Cromwell.
He saw an opportunity.
He seems to have orchestrated the whole thing, ruthlessly efficient. It removed Anne, cleared the way for Jane, and possibly allowed Cromwell to steer religious policy his way too.
Okay, so let's break down the accusations. What were they specifically, and who was accused alongside her?
By early May 1536, Cromwell's commission brought forward these shocking charges. Multiple counts of adultery, incest with her brother George Boleyn, and high treason.
Incest. That's horrific.
Truly sensational. 5 men were arrested along with Anne. Mark Smeaton, a court musician.
Lower status than the others.
Yes, a commoner. Then 4 prominent courtiers: Sir Henry Norris, a close friend of Henry's, Sir Francis Weston, Sir William Brereton, and her brother George Boleyn, Lord Rochford.
And the poet Thomas Wyatt was arrested too, but released.
Yes, Wyatt was arrested but let go. Probably Cromwell's influence, protecting an ally or friend. Sir Richard Page was also accused and acquitted.
The charges against George were specific, weren't they? Dates and places.
Chillingly specific. 2 alleged incidents of incest, one at Whitehall, one at Eltham, in late 1535. Made it seem credible somehow.
And the key figure in making these charges stick seems to have been Mark Smeaton.
Yes, because he was the only commoner among the accused men.
Which meant
He could legally be tortured. Tudor law allowed torture for commoners accused of treason, but not nobility.
and he was tortured.
Brutally interrogated for 24 hours at Cromwell's house. Sources describe a rope twisted around his head until he broke.
And he confessed.
He confessed, said he'd slept with the Queen 3 times. His was the only confession.
Under torture.
Almost certainly extracted under duress. His story included flimsy details, like Anne sending people away for marmalade during a secret meeting. It just doesn't ring true.
It highlights how unfair the whole process was.
Utterly. It's surely no coincidence the only one who confessed was the one who could be tortured.
So Anne is arrested May 2nd, taken to the Tower, denied access to the king.
She was apparently bewildered, alternating between laughing and crying, couldn't understand what was happening.
And things she said in her distress were used against her.
Yes, her frantic mentions of Weston and Norris were twisted into evidence.
The trials happened quickly then. The men first.
May 12th. Smeaton confessed again. The others all pleaded not guilty.
But they were all found guilty.
All found guilty, sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered.
And Anne and George's trial.
May 15th, in the Tower. Unprecedented, a queen on trial. They even built a special scaffold for the nobles judging her.
And she had no lawyer.
No counsel. Yet she defended herself eloquently, apparently, denied everything.
But the verdict was inevitable.
It seems so. The nobles judging her really had no choice if they wanted to keep favor or even their lives. They found her guilty.
And her own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, read the verdict.
Her uncle read the verdict, guilty. To be burned or beheaded at the king's pleasure. Just awful.
And then just 2 days before the execution date, her marriage is annulled.
Yes, May 17th. Archbishop Cranmer, ironically, someone she'd supported, declared the marriage null and void.
On what grounds?
The old story of a supposed pre-contract Anne had with Henry Percy years before. A convenient legal fiction.
So officially, she was never queen, and Elizabeth became illegitimate.
Exactly. Erased from history, legally speaking.
And on that same day, the men were executed.
Yes. Smeaton suffered the full traitor's death. The 4 nobles had their sentences commuted by Henry to beheading.
And they maintained their innocence.
Right to the end, yes. George Boleyn and the others protested their innocence on the scaffold. Something Anne reportedly was glad to hear, even in the Tower.
And even facing death, Anne kept her wit. That joke about her neck.
Astonishing, isn't it? Telling the Tower constable her little neck would make it easy for the executioner. Dark humor, incredible composure.
So, May 19th, 1536. The day of the execution. The waiting must have been unbearable.
Excruciating. Isolated in the Tower. It's thought she might have written that poem, "O Death, Rock Me Asleep Then."
Expressing a kind of weary acceptance.
Yes, lines about her weary, guiltless ghost, the tolling bell. A sense of readiness.
And accounts say her composure in those final hours was remarkable.
Widely noted, apparently after the initial shock and near hysteria following her arrest, she found a deep calm by May 18th.
Telling the Tower constable she was prepared to die.
Yes, clarifying it wasn't that she wanted to die, but she felt prepared. Some modern theories even talk about a kind of trauma-induced transformation, a sight experience.
Finding peace despite the horror.
Radiating a profound peace, some interpretations suggest. A shift in consciousness, which challenges the simple narrative of just despair.
So she walks to the scaffold, calm, dignified.
With an untroubled countenance, witnesses said. One observer thought she looked more beautiful than ever.
The execution was meant to be private, wasn't it?
Technically private, yes, within the Tower grounds, but still about 1,000 people managed to get in to watch.
Including her uncle Norfolk and Henry's illegitimate son.
Yes, a grim audience. Apparently the Tower gates were left open, people just drifted in.
And what she wore, that was symbolic too.
very deliberate. A black damask gown, but with a white ermine cape asserting her rank as queen, even though she'd been stripped of it.
And supposedly a red kirtle underneath, the color of martyrdom.
That's reported, yes. A subtle claim of innocence, perhaps aligning herself with Catholic martyrs.
And the executioner was specially brought from France.
Yes, a swordsman from Calais, known for his skill. A sword was considered more merciful, quicker than the English axe.
She wouldn't need the block.
Kneeling upright. Exactly. A single clean stroke was expected. A small mercy, perhaps.
Her final speech is very famous. What did she actually say?
It's well documented. She started, "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die." She said she was judged by the law and wouldn't speak against it.
Did she protest her innocence?
Not directly. She said, "I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that, whereof I am accused." But crucially, she didn't confess either.
And she praised Henry.
Famously, yes. "I pray God save the king, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never, and to me he was ever a good, a gentle and sovereign lord."
That's extraordinary, given he was executing her.
It is. She also asked people, if they meddled in her cause, to judge the best, and asked for prayers.
Why praise Henry? Was it to protect her family? Elizabeth.
That's the most likely interpretation. A pragmatic final act. She did admit to maybe being jealous sometimes, a sort of minor fault, but nothing treasonous.
And she kept her composure right to the end, joking with Kingston, forgiving the executioner.
Incredible fortitude. Her ladies helped her remove her headdress, weeping. She knelt down.
Whispering prayers.
"O Christ, receive my spirit," repeated.
And the execution itself, was it clean?
Apparently, the swordsman distracted her, made a noise to one side, then struck swiftly from the other. Her head fell into the straw.
And cannons fired to signal her death.
Yes, fired from the Tower Wharf, a signal to the king, waiting miles away, that it was done. He could now marry Jane Seymour.
And then, the final indignity. No burial preparations.
Shocking, isn't it? Her body lay on the scaffold for hours. No coffin, nothing arranged.
Her ladies had to deal with it.
Yes, they cleaned her body, placed it and her head into an old arrow chest they found.
An arrow chest.
The only thing available. They buried her in the Tower Chapel, St. Peter ad Vincula, next to her brother George.
It just seems so callous, neglectful, even for Henry.
It really speaks volumes about the haste, the coldness, the finality of it all, utterly erasing her.
So, looking back now, centuries later, what is Anne Boleyn's legacy? Why does she still fascinate us so much?
She absolutely continues to resonate. For a long time, her image was dominated by that negative Catholic propaganda, the monster legend.
Nicholas Sanders, with the stories of 6 fingers, a win.
Exactly. Physical deformities meant to signify her inner evil. Pure fiction, of course.
Proven fiction by her exhumation.
Completely. When her skeleton was examined in 1876, it showed a delicate frame, normal hands and feet, no deformities.
So how do we see her now? Or how should we see her?
Well, her biographer, Eric Ives, sums it up well. Intelligent, spirit, and courage. A woman who used her education, her style, her presence to overcome the limitations placed on her sex.
Taken a court and a king by storm, even without conventional beauty.
Exactly. She was ahead of her time, strong-willed, fiercely intelligent. And her refusal to just be a mistress
To change English history forever.
led to the Reformation, broke England from Rome. And of course, she gave birth to Elizabeth I, one of England's greatest monarchs. Her impact is just undeniable. Her courage, her complexity, it still captures people. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow, what a story. It's just so packed with drama, intrigue, tragedy.
It really is.
We've gone from her sophisticated upbringing in Europe through that incredibly intense relationship with Henry.
The fire and the passion, definitely.
Felt that crushing weight of expectation, the need for an heir,
Immense pressure.
and walked with her, in a way, to that scaffold in the Tower, witnessing her dignity in the end.
Her influence is just undeniable, isn't it? On the Reformation, on the balance of power. And her character so complex, so enduring.
And thinking about it more broadly, her life is such a stark reminder, isn't it? About the pressures on women in power, especially back then.
Absolutely. And how easily their stories, their reputations, can be manipulated and twisted by those around them, especially by powerful men.
Her intelligence, her defiance, it was ultimately seen as a threat, wasn't it?
It seems so, which led to that tragic end.
But here's something to really chew on, maybe the most fascinating puzzle. Those last words on the scaffold.
Praising Henry.
Right. Calling him a gentle and sovereign lord. Was that purely pragmatic? Just saying what she had to say to protect Elizabeth, protect her family?
That's the logical explanation.
Or could there have been, even then, a tiny flicker of the loyalty, maybe even the love she once felt, even for the man sending her to her death?
It makes you think, doesn't it, about the sheer complexity of human relationships, especially when power is involved, how love and betrayal can coexist in these extreme situations.
And that leads to the other big question. How do we reconcile the different Annes?
Exactly, the passionate, reform-minded woman Henry pursued for years.
The monster legend created afterwards.
And the stoic, dignified figure who faced the swordsman with such composure.
Her ability to maintain that dignity, facing public humiliation and death. It says so much about her inner strength, doesn't it? Whatever was truly going on inside her head.
It really does. It leaves you wondering about that inner peace she seemed to find.
Definitely gives you something to mull over. We really hope this deep dive into Anne Boleyn's life has given you some fresh perspectives, maybe challenged a few assumptions.
Maybe a few aha moments along the way.
Thanks so much for joining us on this historical journey.